Yes, we are very happy that we have such great people in the audience, where we have vice chancellors, we have senior academic leaders, and believe me, as faculty, we are never demotivated by the empty chairs, but we are always motivated by everyone who's on them. So, from the faculty side, I think, I just want to begin with a small teacher prayer, which I think each teacher has in their mind. So it is written by Jill Wolfe. It says, I want to teach my students more than lessons in a book. I want to teach them deeper things that people often overlook. The value of a rose in a bloom, its use and beauty too, a sense of curiosity to discover what is exactly true. How to think and how to choose, the right above the wrong, how to live and learn each day and grow up to be strong. To teach them always how to gain in wisdom and in grace, so they will someday make the world a brighter and better place. Lord, let me be a friend and guide to give these minds a start upon their way down life's long road, then I will have done my part. So this is the role of a faculty, I think, in any academic institution. And after having understood what students want by way of a university, by understanding how collaborations can take us ahead, by understanding what is the industry's expectation from an academic institution, I think now it's time to discuss about the epicenter of the progress, which I think is a faculty. And if I have to give my students so many different things, I think as a faculty, we all need to develop and grow. And it is with this particular thought in mind that the session on faculty development, however it talks about the challenges that the faculty needs to have in their new role. While in corporates, I always heard, corporates run the rat race. Believe me, as faculty, I have started to feel we run with the rat every day. And by the rat, I mean the research, the admin, and the teaching. And having this big rat in your hand, you have to win the race. And I think these are the challenges which every faculty would probably face. With this, I would like to invite our speakers on stage. And of course, the moderator for the session, Dr. Bhama Venkatramani, who has 30 years of work experience in the area of academics and research, and someone whom we always have looked up to, and someone who's always been, a guide who's helped so many faculty develop on the way. Along with Bhama ma'am, I would like to invite all the speakers for the session. So we have Dr. David Ashton. He's from Leeds Beckett University, United Kingdom. We would also like to invite Dr. Sheetal Ranjan, Professor, Department of Justice Studies and Sociology, Montclair State University, USA. Professor Peter Bentley, Policy Advisor, Innovative Research Universities, and Honorary Fellow at the University of Melbourne, Melbourne Centre for Study of Higher Education, Australia. Professor Sarah Brown, Director, Faculty Development, DePaul University, USA. And Professor Agnes, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global Engagement, University of Bristol, UK. Yes. Towards the end of the session, we will also have a video message by Professor Ashok Kumar, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, International, the University of Melbourne, Australia. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Netra, for that wonderful start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session on faculty development, challenges for a new role. I read about a very interesting inscription on the memorial of an American architect and inventor. And it read, "Call me Trim Tab." I didn't know what it meant. I was wondering, what is this Trim Tab? And why does he want to be called a trim tab? I read a little more about it, and I learned that a trim tab is a nautical reference to a metal piece tied to the end of a rudder of a huge ship. So when the ship is moving with a momentum on the ocean, and if you wanted to change direction, it will not help enough if you actually maneuver the rudder. All you needed to do was to move the trim tab a small degree, and it would create a region of low pressure. And that would grow exponentially and would draw the rudder, which in turn would move the ship. So why did he want to be called a trim tab? Because he felt that anybody who had an influence in the context that they worked in is a trim tab. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start this session acknowledging that our faculty is the trim tab in the higher education space that we are talking about. The influence that they have in driving that vehicle, in driving towards the vision and mission of the university, and in playing a transformational role, I think is immense. But this role of a faculty has been changing over time. The last 2 or 3 decades, there have been a lot of disruptions. Talk, for example, the access to information. With information becoming so readily accessible, the students who come to us are basically digital natives. They live, learn, and socialize online. So much so, our faculty will now have, and they have been, shifting the way they taught from being a knowledge provider to a learning facilitator. When it comes to curriculum design, if you had listened to what the students wanted, what the industry wanted, the transformation that we are looking at, the curriculum will now have to be competency-based, recognizing prior learning, recognizing personalized learning, recognizing work-based learning. And with all of this, while the teachers are still teaching, they will also have to pay attention to that mental health issue or academic challenge that the student from Poland was talking about. She wasn't talking about any mental health issue, but she was talking about feeling excluded. All that, a teacher, I think somebody in one of the earlier sessions spoke about having to be a parent, a teacher having to be a parent. So with all these roles, it's becoming a little more complex. Technology is playing a major role, and teachers will now have to bring in technology into class to make it engaging and experimental. Then you're talking about issues of access and equity. With higher education becoming more and more aspirational, the governments want to ensure access, and universities are trying to address this by offering online education, which means a teacher is going to learn a new skill. And then we are talking about a very, very diverse student cohort, diverse with respect to age, their learning requirements, the backgrounds that they come from. Many of them, as we understood, are first-generation learners. Somebody made that reference a little in one of the sessions. So that's another challenge. And of course, we have to be cognizant of the, can I say, prescriptive regulations and quality standards that are set by our regulators, by our accrediting agencies, by our ranking agencies, and all of this. Now, if a faculty has to continue to be the fulcrum and play the transformational role, what is it that the university will have to do to ensure that we give them an ecosystem that will help them develop themselves? For all this and more, we have a wonderful panel of university leaders and policy influencers with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome our speakers. Without any further ado, I'd like to turn to Dr. Sheetal Ranjan. She was talking to us about some thought experiment that she wanted to conduct. Do you want to take it over, Dr. Sheetal?
Hello, everyone. I know it's a smaller audience, but it's also that time of the day when coffee is needed. I stepped out 3 times to get some so I can understand. But here, just a simple thing. I just want to know, how many of you have an undergraduate? I can guess, but I'm asking the question, obvious question, right? How many of you have an undergraduate degree here? Please raise your hand, right? How many have a master's also? Almost all. How many have a PhD here? Almost all, right? So you've gone through many, many, many years of education in your life. All I want you to do is to take a moment and think about the most influential person in that journey of education. You cannot think of a friend or a classmate or anything. I just want you to think to yourself, who would you credit? Who are the 4 or 5 top people which surface to your mind? You may not remember their names, anything, but if you remember their face, you remember what they meant to you then and what they mean to you, what they said meant to you now. Could you think of that for me? I'm going to give you a minute. I don't think I have to answer this one, right? It's for who we forget all the time. It is the faculty, the central role of the teacher in educating students. So I hope you will agree with me that we need to keep the classroom experience as a prime driver of everything that we're doing here. We wouldn't exist if that experience did not exist. And I believe, and I speak to a number of presidents in my various roles, I guess they've put a couple of them out there, where I'm faculty on one side, but on the other side, I am a trustee at a community college. I take on leadership roles at state and national bodies, work on transition teams with governors, and I always remind them that the classroom is where the rubber meets the road. The classroom is central to everything you do. So do not come up, talking about education without recognizing everything begins in the classroom, and that's what the students will remember 10, 15, 20 years down the line, just as you did just now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. That once again reiterates the influence that the teacher has on anybody. I'd now like to turn to Dr. Peter Bentley. What are your thoughts on the growing demand on the time of the academics? And when you're talking about it, can you please also talk about the different roles that they play, particularly research versus teaching? That debate is continuing. And also, how do we value or make the teachers feel valued equally and equitably, irrespective of the roles they play?
Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk today. If we think about the growing demands on academics, we have to look back on the last few decades as higher education participation has shifted from an elite system to mass and in some countries a universal access system. In the 80s and 90s, research became integrated into former colleges, new universities at an institutional level, and we saw that gradual transition for a PhD becoming a prerequisite for the current staff and for all new staff going into these institutions in the late 80s and 90s. And I think it's been a strong success story for those staff in those universities to add research into their roles. Throughout the 90s, we saw a separation of teaching from research at an individual level. So universities maintained that research and teaching mission, but not all academics were doing those two jobs together. And this boosted teaching efficiency and productivity, or certainly research productivity. In Australia, it's been, again, a good success story where it hasn't just been outputs, it's been research that has had citation impact. Student satisfaction has continued to increase over time. Retention rates have improved. But on the other side, for the staff, those in specialised roles have often been on hourly-based contracts for teaching-focused staff or rolling fixed-term contracts for research-focused staff. So those increased productivity has come at a personal cost for many people whose careers haven't developed. Subsequent to that, in the 2000s, we started to see a fragmentation within the teaching and research roles. It was no longer sufficient to be a domain knowledge expert, either in your teaching or in your research. we've heard before that scholarly research must now have impact. It must have both citation impact, it must also have impact on the community. It must have perhaps commercialization impact. Academics are needing to draw funding, find their own funding for research. This is stretching those roles that were previously not there for academic staff in teaching and research roles. And on the teaching side, it's no longer sufficient just to be teaching critical thinking skills for students. They need skills for the workplace. They're expecting employability. Online and blended education, academics are not just chalk on a board teaching anymore. They've got to be able to do a range of activities, and students are expecting that. And as systems have moved towards more universal participation, students who would otherwise not have attended higher education are there, and they are sometimes less prepared, or many of them are less prepared for higher education than before. And staff are needing to engage in types of pastoral care for students, their mental health and well-being and so forth. And there's been a bit of a flow-on effect also for that certain staff are taking on more of that burden. And while we might not have the empirical data to prove it, we do have a strong sense that it's the female staff that are typically those that are engaged more in teaching that are taking on this work. Generally, we're faced with this choice of, can we expect all academics to engage in all these activities within the teaching and research and engagement roles? I think I'll answer that question and say just no, that's a terrible idea to expect that. But we still need to think about how to support staff that are doing each of these types of activities. So again, commercialisation. Do you need mandatory courses and professional development for all staff so that they know how to commercialise their research? Again, no, because not all researchers and academics are motivated by their research, but those that are need to have access to that sort of support. When we think about what's equitable and equal, equitable is highly contested. I might have a heavier teaching load than Professor Sarah, but that's clearly unequal, but it may not be inequitable if I've got a great deal more experience teaching, if I'm an established professor and she is an early career academic. So we must recognise that and account for career stage in all of the ways in which academic work is distributed across a faculty. Ensuring that these are equitable, we also need to make sure that if those are pursuing teaching-focused careers, that they have a stable career pathway in the same way that those who pursue a more research-focused career or a blended career engaged in both of those things. And we haven't seen that, but we're starting to see a trend more towards those things in Australia, where the limited term contracts it's causing a lot of political problems for our universities. But it's also the right thing to do to provide careers. Now, having stable employment is one thing, and having access to become a full professor through a teaching-focused role or a research-focused role, that's good, but we need to make sure that there's coherence for the promotion and career pathways. So there's no point having a full professor in a teaching-focused role if in order to get and become a full professor, you need to publish scholarly research at a huge amount in international journals, because if staff are not paid to do these tasks, then it should not be part of the promotion criteria to get up to the full professor role, or else you are privileging research again over teaching. On the other hand, things are very slow to change. So establishing these pathways today will take time before people will see mentors and leaders who have gone down those pathways and become full professors and made careers within particular roles within the teaching and research portfolio. So we do need to be patient. On the other hand, as much as I like academics and love them, in fact, I did my PhD on the academic profession, they can be what some people have labelled them heroic complainers. They will find reasons to find themselves unequally or inequitably treated, and they will spend a lot of time checking data and so forth in order to justify their feelings of that way. I'll just close with some good practices. Obviously, coherence between different policies within the university is a good thing, but probably the most important thing is to provide staff with the time to do these tasks and have it scaled for experience, knowing that inexperienced staff need more time. And then consider the range of formal training, graduate certificates for university teaching, qualifications that teach you how to teach in a classroom are probably a good idea to ensure that teaching quality is maintained. Professional development opportunities, optional things like commercialization, research development, how to apply for funding and manage research projects, entrepreneurial sorts of activities, and informal support like mentoring and peer review of teaching. A challenge to implement these good practices is that the teaching, from my experience working with the universities in Australia, teaching and research fall under different Deputy Vice-Chancellor portfolios. You've got Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research, that's responsible for all of the research, training and development, and then you've got Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic or Education, responsible for the teaching side. And those two often don't talk together or meet, so they become siloed. A good example where it has been kind of overcome is looking at the long-term and PhD training, ensuring that PhDs are not just teaching during their PhD, but are trained to teach in the same way that we would expect staff that are recruited into academic functions to be. So whether that's graduate certificates in university or teaching, those can be integrated into the PhD. And we've got perhaps one of our universities in our network, Western Sydney, is transitioning staff from teaching-focused contract roles into teaching and research roles, but they're not just letting staff sink or swim. They're incorporating, again, the time for these staff to pursue research and also the research training. So staff that were previously not paid to do research, they might have been, at best, paid to do scholarship. Those that pursue those pathways are not expected to be up to producing research immediately upon being in those positions. There are some risks with that approach in that if you're training PhDs today, you won't see the benefit. You won't know whether your interventions are successful until many years from now. You won't know whether the professional development has worked for the staff that have transitioned into teaching and research roles is successful until they've had a chance to implement it. So that carries a long-term risk. Some of our other universities in Australia have taken a different approach, more punitive approach, you could say, and looking at staff that are in teaching and research roles that are not pursuing the research that's aligned with the strategic interests of the university, and squeezing their research load and giving them more teaching. Those ones might show short-term benefits because staff will continue to teach more while they're looking for other jobs, and their research has a time lag, so the research they've been doing for the previous years will still be published subsequently a year from now, but you'll see a few years later on that what you've done today, squeezing the staff too hard, that you won't see the research into the future. So I'll stop there because I know others have got far better examples of what works.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, there are a number of points that you made. It was very pertinent to note that even when it comes to teaching and research, it's not just teaching and research. Even that is further fragmented, and that causes a lot of stress on our faculty. But some of the good practices that you shared with us, I think are worth considering. Thank you so much. I will now move on to Dr. Agnes Narn. Dr. Agnes, you have been a senior member of the leadership in your university. Can you share some of the strategies that you all adopt for recruitment and development of your faculty, such that you nurture each of their strengths?
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I'm a marketing professor, but I've been at the University of Bristol for about 6 years and in this role in our senior leadership team. We're a research-intensive university, so Bristol's actually the 5th strongest research university in the UK, and we're very proud of that. The city of Bristol is about an hour and a half west of London. It's a really cool city. It's a very creative city. It's a very green city. David Attenborough's Blue Planet is made there. It's the home of Wallace and Gromit. Why am I telling you this? Because, first of all, most people don't know where Bristol is because we don't have a Premier League football team like Manchester or Liverpool. I have asked the Vice-Chancellor if she might like to buy one, but she's not that keen. I don't know why. I'm also telling you about the city because it actually has a big impact on the recruitment and the development of our faculty. Because we are a global civic university, and that means that we have links with our local government, our local businesses, our local entrepreneurs, and our local people. And it's also the case that a lot of our faculty and a lot of our students come to our university partly because we've got this great research reputation, but they also really, really love the city. And that's part of our recruitment, is that they actually really, really love the city, and that's important. We've also just started to build a brand new campus. Now, we're not like India, who can throw up a campus in 5 months. It's going to take us a very, very long time. And this campus is in one of the most deprived areas of Bristol. It's been called the biggest urban regeneration project in Europe. And this, in our city, is going to have a big impact on the recruitment and the development of our faculty, because we're going to share this campus with local businesses and local entrepreneurs. Now, these businesses and entrepreneurs, of course, will be the employers of our students, and that means, first of all, we need a curriculum that meets their needs, and they're our very close neighbours. But there are also going to be other skills that these faculty are going to need, because we're looking for new ways to teach using brand new technologies. We're going to be offering student places to local students. I know Chika was talking about the local students in South Africa. These will be students who've never been to university before, who have no one in their families at university. They'll be different students. We'll be looking at lifelong learners, so we'll be looking at adult learners for the first time. And just like Symbiosis, we want to be a global campus, so we'll have students from all over the world. So our faculty are going to have to learn to teach a whole set of different kinds of students. How are we tackling this? With support and with time. So we're at a senior level, we're talking about it. We're not saying we're doing all this stuff and we just expect you to do it. We're admitting and saying up front, this is going to be really, really tough, and we're trying to put the right kind of support, workshops, training programs in place to help the staff. We're also traveling around the world looking at different campuses in businesses as well as in universities to look at what are the best technologies in classrooms. What's the best furniture? You know, should all the furniture be on wheels? Yes, it probably should, actually. So we're doing that too. So we've got challenges as a civic university, and of course, yesterday we heard from the students that they want academic subject choice, they want to choose disciplines they're passionate about, they want to mix completely different disciplines that are interdisciplinary, they want education about life, they want to know about financial management, they want extracurricular activities, they want a space to learn who they actually are as an individual, they want a space to learn to be diverse. They want education for employment, they want education to be a global citizen, and they want all of this while maintaining really good mental health. They're actually not unreasonable demands, but the demands that they put on faculty are really quite extraordinary. So how do we tackle this? Do we have the faculty that can do this, or do we have the structures? And do we have a slide there about structure somewhere? Maybe? We don't have a slide about structures. Oh, we do have a slide about structures. Yay, we have a slide about structures. Sorry, it's not an exciting slide. Sorry about that. But in the UK, we have 3 pathways for faculty. Pathway 1 is teaching and research. Pathway 2 is research. Pathway 3 is teaching. Now, in theory, all of these paths are equal. So you can see, just by looking at this diagram very quickly, that each of the paths can lead up to being a professor, or indeed up to being a pro-vice-chancellor or a chancellor or whatever. So they are equal, and the performance appraisal, which you asked about, happens within each of the pathways. So we're not comparing research staff with teaching staff. They have their own ways of being appraised, which I think makes sense. So can just having these structures deliver this wonderful set of faculty that can do everything we've said? Well, as you mentioned, people always find things to complain about. There are some really genuine stresses and very different stresses on each of the 3 pathways. So Pathway 1 faculty are stressed because they've got to research for 40% of the time, they've got to teach for 40% of the time, and then they've got to do service, looking after a course or something for 20% of the time. And these are the staff that do the personal tutoring. So they're looking after the mental health of our students. And we've had a very high profile, very sad case of a student suicide, where, how do you feel if you're a physics professor and you're looking after the pastoral care of that student, and that student takes their own? It's really tough, and I mean really, really tough. The Pathway 2 staff have a completely different stress. They only have a job if they bring in the research income. So they've got to constantly be looking for research income in order to maintain their job. So they've got job insecurity, and that's a very different kind of stress. Now, what we've done is we've brought in an Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research Culture, and they're leading a program of activities, particularly for early career researchers, to help support those who are doing research, whether it's for all of their career or part of their career. And we're also part of a Concordat, which supports the research development of our researchers in the UK. And it looks at employment, it looks at career development, and it also looks at culture. So there's some of the ways that we're trying to do these. The Pathway 3s, as you alluded to, don't do research. Now, if you're in a research-intensive university and you don't do research, you can sometimes feel a little bit marginalized. So what we do is we say, no, actually, guys, you're really, really important. We need you here. And we also encourage them to do research on pedagogy. So to publish in pedagogical journals, which will then allow them to get 4-star journal articles if they might want to move paths. But just to finish and come back to where I started about the civic mission and our brand new campus. I think this new campus with the employers there, the Pathway 3 staff are really, really going to come into their own, because these are the ones who have experimented with pedagogy and online pedagogy and new technologies during the pandemic, because they haven't had to research. They're also very often practitioners. So if we take our law professors, our business professors, our film and TV professors, they're the ones who are going to be teaching the employability skills. They're the ones who the employers in our building are going to be reaching out to and forming partnerships with. They're going to be teaching, making presentations, working in international teams, negotiation, writing reports, all of that sort of thing. So I think it's very clear universities of the future face tremendous tensions to produce world-class research, as well as these inspired, job-ready, healthy, fulfilled students who are going on, not all to be leaders, as we heard from the students yesterday. I think a structure like this goes maybe some way towards helping to recruit, retain, and develop the staff that we really want. But it's only really just the beginning, and there are lots of challenges, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the rest of the panel have to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agnes. We have two important takeaways from this. One is the pathways that you spoke about, and the other one is having employers on your campus and helping them, the teachers creating curriculum that will help them get employed there. So the two very interesting experiences. Thank you so much. I'll now turn to Dr. David Ashton. You are the Pro-Vice Chancellor in your university, and you have been given the responsibility of writing the strategy through 2030. While you're doing this, we all appreciate that the university's strategies are actually influenced by government policies also, and in turn, your policies impact faculty. So can you tell us something about how you're handling all of this?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me start by agreeing with my colleagues. I think that to be an academic, to be a member of faculty is certainly becoming more complex. And as you say, Dr. Bama, one of the key reasons for that is tied to university responses to government agendas. So like Agnes, I'm going to reflect on the context that I know, which is the UK one, or more precisely England, because Wales and Scotland have slightly different higher education regimes, although many of the themes are familiar. And I'm going to argue that in England, the role of the academic has changed and continues to change in at least the following 3 ways. First, academic autonomy is much reduced on what it used to be, especially over one of the key academic issues, quality assurance and standards in learning and teaching. Second, I'm going to argue that colleagues are subject to ever more external measurement, both in research and through the proxy of the learning outcomes achieved by students, now also learning and teaching as well. And third, I'm going to suggest that academics regularly need to adjust their work to reflect changing views on what is valuable in higher education, in the opinion of government and other important stakeholders as well. So of the 3, first, loss of autonomy. To establish my point, I need to travel back to 2016, when the then regulator for higher education in England and Northern Ireland made a seminal intervention and determined that university boards of trustees should take overall responsibility for academic quality issues through the assurances that they make. This was a major intervention. Boards of trustees had tended to allow senates to govern on academic matters and had confined themselves to corporate affairs. In turn, senates and academic boards had vigorously defended their independence governing academic matters from trustees. The regulator's intervention effectively ended faculty autonomy on decisions about quality and standards, at least formally so. In practice, few boards of trustees were fit for purpose for dealing with academic matters, and most universities adopted some form of co-regulation of standards. But I think it's reasonable to conclude that quality and standards are now a shared space. Faculty are required to share that space with lay or non-academic trustees. And moreover, in order to manage this new relationship with trustees, universities have had to develop more managerial approaches to internal academic governance mechanisms at department, school, and faculty level, a changing context for our faculty colleagues. My second point was about increased measurement of academic performance. Being measured is a pretty familiar phenomenon for academics in the UK conducting research. The research assessment research excellence framework, I should say, which is a national schema for peer review of the quality and environmental impact of research conducted at universities, is very well established. Faculty are familiar with their research being measured as either 2-star, 3-star, or 4-star in its quality set against a set of external metrics. This propensity for measurement has also been there for some time in learning and teaching. But things took a sharp turn last year. In 2022, the UK Government Secretary for State for Education announced a new set of student outcome metrics and associated thresholds that universities must meet to demonstrate the upholding of standards. Universities that fail to meet the required outcomes can be subject to review by the regulator, and we believe, although it's not quite yet in public, that they will be subject to student recruitment controls, which is to say, cap on student intake numbers. These changes, again, clearly add to the pressures on academics, in this case to support students to achieve the level of results demanded by output thresholds and benchmarks. And my third point of the 3 was about what now constitutes value in our space. As mentioned, my primary role at Leeds Beckett is to deliver a new strategy for the university that will determine its academic size and shape through to the end of the decade. The core of the strategy will be straightforward. It will center on the university's academic mission, but it's essential indeed that the strategy is grounded in the political and funding context over the next few years. The UK government is right on behalf of the taxpayer to make demands of the higher education system, and there are, for me, currently 3 demands that really stand out. The first is the expectation that universities are able to demonstrate how they help improve economic productivity. The second is how they help to deal with regional disparities. And the third is how they help address social disadvantage. So in my developing strategy, my university responds to improved economic productivity two ways. First, we'll continue to focus on degree programs that have a clear vocational focus and are aimed at supporting student employability in key industries. This is in line with a long-term heritage for Leeds Beckett University as a university with a strong vocational focus. But second, we'll strengthen the non-disciplinary specific skills-based learning within our degree programs as well. These are the skills that students require for employment. Again, this latter step will ask more of colleagues. It effectively transforms the curriculum from a vehicle for sharing disciplinary knowledge to a place where non-disciplinary learning needs to be accommodated as well, with all the inherent complications for my staff. For regional disparities, well, Leeds Beckett is a large metropolitan university in Northern England's second biggest city. The university will want to play its part as a key member of a broad-based network of public institutions acting together to help drive the economic and social prosperity of the region we serve. But again, in this strategy, this is asking more of our faculty colleagues. This strategy will rely on colleagues connecting with civic and business leaders and developing learning and teaching and conducting research that is informed by issues that are important to the city and the region. We're asking faculty to proactively work in partnership to address local economic and social needs. And lastly, social disadvantage. Our strategy will emphasize continued commitment to widening participation, inclusion, and belonging. But yet again, here we'll be asking more of our faculty. For if we are to be successful with this part of it, we'll need to call upon faculty to again develop their pedagogy and their wider practice in ways that can support the building of inclusive learning environments so that all students, regardless of the cultural or educational capital which they start their degree programs with, they can all be successful by the end. So in one more minute, just to finish, how can we as leaders respond to these challenges now facing faculty? My first point isn't very profound, I guess. It's simply to be aware of the changing context in which we are asking our colleagues to work, to recognize the extension of responsibilities and the additional burdens we're making of colleagues, and provide them with the developmental support that Peter and others were talking about to allow them to adapt to the new changes ahead. But I think the leadership response really needs to go a little bit deeper as well. The changes to governance arrangements in the UK that have affected quality and standards in learning and teaching can really be explained by a general shift in confidence in self-regulation across the public services. In higher education, the sector was accused of inflating the number of good degree awards and of insufficient care over a rise in non-completion rates. It's not for me to pass judgment on that, but to say instead as a response, again, we need to be supportive to our colleagues, be robust in our own commitment as leaders to standards, and we need to be successful in being transparent and effective in our communication about what we do and how we do it. I could have summarized my speech by saying that in recent times, the single biggest change to academic life in England is the additional context in which academics are now held accountable for their work. And if so, the leadership challenge now extends beyond the provision of the best possible environment in which our colleagues can excel in their academic work. It extends to getting the context right to help sure they can also achieve all the other wider responsibilities that are now attributed to them as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. David. So what I noted from your talk is that there were three important changes. One is the academic autonomy, which was eroded for the faculty, external measurement, which became tougher, and the fundamental question of what is value in higher education. And from your summary, what I noted is you are actually engaging with your faculty, being more transparent in your communication with them, taking them onto your side, and helping them develop and support. you're seeking them to be aware of the changing context. And most importantly, I think it is a shared responsibility of quality assurance that you are moving ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very interesting thoughts. Interesting but challenging, I'm sure. Dr. Sheetal Ranjan, we just heard two university leaders talking about governance-related issues. You are a person who wears several hats. What would your advice be for academic staff to develop themselves? Because, see, right from yesterday, we've heard the students asking for what they want. We heard the industry asking for what they want. We heard several panelists talking about what the future of education, higher education should be. Given all this, what would be your advice for faculty members to, towards self-development, towards understanding the changing context, and anything else that you think that will help them deal with these challenges?
Thanks, Bauman. I've really enjoyed these conversations that I've heard from my colleagues. And I'm going to answer your second part first and your first part second, all right? So first, of course, I want to highlight what Dr. Agnes spoke about, the pathways, the teaching, research, the teaching alone, the research alone. In the US, where I come from, for the large part that I've been in the academic world as a faculty, it's a combination of teaching, research, and a small component of service over the years. I have taught at a teaching-first institution. Now I'm at a research-first institution. And that has changed how people view me and how I view the system. So one of the things I do keep in mind, like also because of my interaction with leaders in education who hire, my thing is that whenever you hire new faculty, the process has to be very thoughtful and deliberate, very, very thoughtful. Put a lot into it. And I think that comes from recognizing the context, which Dr. Ashton just spoke about. We expect you to recognize the context, and we expect you to guide us, right? As faculty, we couldn't be recognizing the context. So we count on that. But that said, we should not forget that the centrality of the teaching experience is in the classroom. We spoke about it before, and you could look back in time and think, and those experiences were valuable, much as they were outside, they were valuable outside. And I feel that administrators are actually the protectors of that experience. I don't see you as managers. I rather see you as protectors of that experience. So with that in mind, I feel that in your role as protector, I want you to understand classroom needs are going to change. You may feel they're coming down you like with a hose pipe, but they might come down even faster in 5 years or 10 years from now. And so when you're hiring, I think you need to keep that trajectory in mind and not hire based on what's currently in fashion, what you need right now in the classroom, but rather what you'll need over time. I think hiring of faculty has been very thoughtful and deliberate, and me being a faculty member myself, I'm able to say that for sure. And then, once hired, of course, faculty need all the kinds of support which probably Bentley has spoken about and others have spoken about. Then it comes to what I feel is that it's not necessary to match this minute's need, or we need online learning, or we need MOOC, this is in fashion, or we don't know what's in fashion tomorrow once AI and ChatGPT hits. So what are you going to do? Your vision is also, much as you're a visionary leader of the institution, your vision can only go as far. It cannot go to the end. So you have to think through that, but then you also have to think that, we don't have to hire for fashion, all right? We're going to hire for the longevity and the classroom experience, we being the protector. So think about this. Why not engage with diverse teaching styles? You talk so much about diversity and diversity in the classroom and students needing diversity, faculty recognizing diversity. Why don't you recognize diversity? Why don't you recognize diversity in teaching styles? And don't try to mold the faculty to a specific style, but rather make a sales pitch to the students that at this institution you will encounter diverse learning styles. So that will give you a little breathway because faculty are experts. They know what they're doing in the classroom. You've hired them well, right? We started with that. You hire them. You hire them well. So you've done that. You've had the trajectory in mind. You've provided them support. But then you also have to guide the students to understand that there is a diversity over here, and that's better for you. Why? As Obama used the word digital natives, so I'm not even going to say what I wrote. I'm going to use her word, digital natives. I mean, if they're exposed to screen time so much, what is the harm if a faculty member is not using screens to teach? Shouldn't they be exposed to different teaching styles, which do not necessarily need them to be on a screen again? Wasn't that healthier in the long run? Those are the kind of questions I want you to ask yourself as you do. So students need diverse learning experience, and I believe our faculty can provide them, right? And I think as administrators, I call you as protectors, right? So I said capitalize on your faculty strengths. You know who you have. You know the goods you have behind you. So capitalize on their strengths, but be creative with your policies. The moment you're creative with your policies, faculty will feel an extreme burden to be on your side. I've known that. Every time an administrator has believed, when I brought in research funding, and I'm not at a Research One institution, but they have believed in me and supported and given me that, I have felt obliged to live up to their expectation on whatever else they needed. So I think that's a very important piece. And the other thing, now I'm coming to your first question about advice to academic staff, right? I'm not one way, like, I'm not the chief complaining officer today. So I'm going to say my advice to academic staff is, so one, recognize that you've been hired, and you've been hired for your talents and for your abilities, but you are part of the changing landscape of education, so you do have to keep yourself updated. It's not that you do not have any responsibility in the process and you have to push it off all to administrators that, oh, this or oh, that. Understand that there is the changing landscape, so that trust that you're talking about, that transparency that you're talking about, the shared governance that you're talking about comes into play. As opposed to two opposing forces, we become two coalescing forces, and we work together to change that landscape. So, and also, if you are adept at showcasing your strengths, it's not just being good at what you do, but also being able to showcase, because how far can an administrator look down? They count on their deans or the chairs of departments to say, oh, this faculty member, this or that. So you have to be very talented and adept at showcasing what your strengths are, so that they see value in your strengths and they don't push you in different directions and you don't feel pushed. That's how I feel about it. And I think I followed that in my own career trajectory to much success and much happiness more than anything else. Success is, on one side, it's not a number. Success is the happiness you feel by walking into the institution to do the work that you want to do every day.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ranjan. So you actually given two viewpoints. One is that of the organization, the management, who you seek should be protectors and leverage on the strengths of the faculty, not forcing them to change the styles because that is the need at that point in time. That's the first point you made. The second one you were talking about is the faculty should also appreciate that there is a changing landscape. There is a demand, like from regulators, there's a demand. From the industry, there's a demand. So how will the university run without the support of the faculty? And therefore, they should also appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. So I'm coming to Professor Sarah Brown. I have 3 important questions for you. The first one is, you are creating and delivering, I'm sure, modules that will help your teachers in the modalities of teaching. But what is your approach to help them deal with mental health issues of students, of themselves, because with all of this, I'm sure they must also be, facing challenges. The second one is with respect to technology. We are all hearing about ChatGPT, and now, the current generation, they know much more about technology than most faculty know. So how do you help them deal with that? And the third question is, do you face any resistance from your faculty to get trained regularly?
Thank you so much, and thank you to my wonderful colleagues up here who I'm going to source in order to answer that first question. So I'm Sarah Brown. I'm at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois in the US, and I'm the Director of Faculty Development in our Center for Teaching and Learning. And so while we have certainly had professors approaching us to say, we are seeing higher levels than we've ever seen before of student mental health need in our classrooms, can you help us figure out how to address those needs? I don't have expertise in counseling, psychology. And so that's been an important role that we could play in trying to, one key thing we've done there is to source internally, to go to the faculty within those professions in our university and ask them to give us resources, workshops, things like that. But once they're equipped with those tools, what we see is the faculty member reaching the end of an academic year, looking around saying, okay, I've met all of those regulatory things that have now been placed on me. There's new assessments, this trustee person I'm working with, I have figured that out, that is done. Oh, yep, but I also need to be thinking about some of these technologies, but still holding true to who I am as a faculty member. And yet it is important for me to be showcasing those things, and I've got to update that tenure portfolio. Okay, I did all of that, check, that's done. And then I still have, multiple different roles that I'm sourcing, like maybe there's a committee I'm on. Maybe it was a sort of contentious committee. Oh, but that is done now. I can check done, that's behind me. And then I've got this maybe a new challenge or opportunity that's coming from leadership. Maybe it's exciting, and I'm trying to muster that excitement. But I've had those students who have all of those range of expectations that you were addressing from the wonderful panel yesterday. And my grades are almost done, and 2 of them need letters of recommendation in the next 3 days. Okay, I can get all of that done. And then I stop and pause and breathe and think, maybe my mental health is not all that great at this moment. Are we surprised by that? We most certainly shouldn't be, given the range of challenges that have already been presented by the speakers here. So the best thing that I think that my unit can do is to play the role of partner to say, much as you might try, you just can't do it all. So when you're trying to figure out that new problem in the classroom, we're here to provide those resources, those scholarship of teaching and learning resources that are at the ready that you might need in this moment. It's to just listen and acknowledge and say, that sounds incredibly difficult. You must be a little tired, and that's okay. Many of the challenges that are being raised here are systemic. They're not something that a 1-hour workshop on, wonderful though they are, effective breathing techniques, great things to do, that's not going to fix all of the range of issues that has been raised here. So I think my role is just to be that partner, to provide the resources at the ready in the ways that faculty are seeking them. And that really leads to your second question about ChatGPT and AI. You know, when that was released in November of 2022, most of what I saw from the administrators and faculty I was working with was that mix of exhaustion and panic, of just, in my institution at least, there was that 3-week period in March 2020 where we had to put all of our final exams online with like 3 days notice, grade, and then a week later, spring term started and everything was online. We did that. And then we got through a year of pretty much online learning. And then we started coming back in the stressors of that. And then now there's this existential crisis to the way that, not a crisis, but a change, a tidal shift coming to the way that we learn and know and communicate. And it's no wonder that most of the conversations I start with faculty have to start with a caretaking moment, a moment of acknowledging, wow, this is scary. We're going to get through this together. This is not going to end the ways of being and knowing and doing that you have been as an expert teacher for so many years. I'm here to help you figure this out. We're all learning it together. And let me just be the distiller of the fire hose of knowledge that's coming at us on a daily basis as these tools are developed and released. And I will help you think through together what this means for your classroom practice, what this means for how you're going to know what your students are learning. That's the key crisis that I think these AI are presenting for faculty, that so many of us, not just writing faculty like myself, use writing as our facsimile for how we're seeing what's happening in a student's brain. And if we can't rely on that writing anymore, that's rather terrifying. We have to figure out different ways of evaluating whether or not we're doing our jobs of facilitating the learning that that's our purpose in doing this work. And I think that really brings to your third question about if there's ever a perceived resistance from faculty, or if they reach those moments where the complaints start coming. Again, given all those things I talked about in summing up what my co-panelists have said, is there any surprise that sometimes we might need a little moment of complaint to come? That emotion has to go somewhere, and sometimes it comes out feeling a little grumpy, a little distracted, a little, wow, what a great and innovative campus that sounds like. Wouldn't it be nice if someone had the time to figure that out? That kind of an attitude is understandable given the range of pressures and responsibilities, and how many times in a day a faculty member's brain has to switch roles in order to meet all of the demands that have been outlined here. I was at another conference a couple months ago, and a CEO of a tech company that I won't name was talking about his work with faculty at different universities, and he said, oh, I tend to run into two kinds of faculty. The kind of faculty who are eager and who will be early adopters, who are excited for a new innovation, and the rest of them you have to pay to get to do anything. And I thought that was a pretty simplistic and unfair way of characterizing my colleagues, who perhaps deserve compensation for time and effort invested in innovating and learning new skills and upskilling themselves. And we're so grateful for the bleeding edge people who are out there willing to try first, but just because someone isn't jumping at the moment that a new AI is released to learn and integrate it into their classroom doesn't mean they're necessarily resistant. It just means they have all of those things to do, and they have to pick up their kid at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock is generous. It's probably 3:45. So, I think the best thing that, again, a group like mine can do is to say, we recognize all of those things. Where can we meet you? Where is the space? Where do you have that time? Do you really need a financial incentive in order to displace that time from another investment? Maybe we can find that time or that money for you. So I really see faculty as, and this again speaks to the opening comments given to this panel, no one in this room wants to be a medium teacher. This is a passion profession. This is a place where people come to engage with the students. That's why we've been so thrilled to see the students this week. And we want to be doing all these things at a high level, but doing that all within the scope of a 24-hour day where sleep is sometimes recommended, very, very difficult to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Your approach was very, very empathetic, understanding of the faculty's challenges. And I think you came across more as a buddy to the faculty. I think that's a wonderful approach to take. Thank you so much, and very insightful, the way you looked at it. Thank you. We now have a video bite from Professor Muthupandian Ashok Kumar, who's the head of School of Chemistry, Assistant Deputy Vice Chancellor. Can we have the IT team play it, please?
Hello, everyone. My sincere apology that I have not been able to join you all in person due to another important commitment here in Melbourne. My name is Ashok. I'm working at the University of Melbourne since 1996. I have a few different roles at the university that include Professor of Physical Chemistry, Head of School of Chemistry, and Assistant Deputy Vice Chancellor International. Our university has been working with a number of Indian institutions in both transnational education and transnational research areas. I would like to thank Symbiosis for their kind invitation to share my views on faculty development, challenges for a new role. The terminology faculty here means academic staff member. I would like to congratulate them for organizing such a wonderful and challenging conference on the future of the universities and their roles in making the world a better place. I would like to also thank Austrade Mumbai, Monica Kennedy, and her team for their support. Coming to the topic for discussion, I'm looking at from an academic institution perspective, when we recruit a staff member, what kind of aspects that we want to focus upon. In a large institution such as University of Melbourne, where teaching of undergraduate and postgraduate courses play a major role, unlike in India where most of the undergraduate teaching is carried out at colleges affiliated to universities, the selection criteria that we normally follow will have equal weightage on teaching needs of a department or a school, in addition to research excellence. Of course, private institutions in India are in a similar position. The challenges associated with recruiting a new staff member is a very complex process. One needs to look at the quality of teaching skills the new staff member may bring to the institution. Of course, such skills need to complement the needs of the department or a school or an institution. In my opinion, challenges associated with recruiting an academic staff with relevant teaching skills and capacity is not a big challenge. One needs to look at the following sustainability issues. The academic or faculty in Indian terminology should be able to handle teaching courses in single or multidisciplinary areas. Being a chemistry professor, I can give you an example. Thermodynamics, generally considered as a physical chemistry topic, can be taught by an academic specialized in physical chemistry. This used to be the case maybe a decade or two ago. However, thermodynamics plays a key role in organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, biochemistry, chemical engineering, medicine, etc. What this means is that current generation academics should teach a particular topic with a multidisciplinary approach. We can think about several such scenarios that requires that a current generation academic to possess flexible and adaptable teaching capabilities. Of course, another major flexible skill is the adaptability for the mode of delivery as we experienced during the pandemic. The majority of academics have acquired skills in this area, and also they are incorporating AI platforms in their teaching delivery mode. Now I would like to focus on the research aspects of an academic when you try to recruit them. For a school or a department, for an academic institution which is recruiting an academic staff member, it needs to consider the existing research capabilities, gaps in research capabilities, strategic direction it needs to take to expand its research capabilities. Typically, when recruiting a junior academic staff, for example, lecturers or senior lecturers, there may be some flexibility. One can try to appoint someone with the research skills that are complementary to the research areas that are already in place in the school or department. For example, if a school has strong capabilities in energy materials and existing academics are at a senior level, one may want to recruit junior members to continue and strengthen this research area. On the other hand, a department or an institution may go for a strategic appointment at senior level, say a professor or a senior scientist, to initiate a new research direction. Again, an institution needs to look at various strategies when choosing an academic with relevant research capabilities. In summary, my short presentation has highlighted the complexities and challenges associated with recruiting new academic staff members. One needs to look at the strategic needs of the institution from both teaching and research perspectives. Of course, I have completely avoided talking about other skills such as leadership skills, collegiality, student supervision, mentoring, etc. due to lack of time. Hope the aspects I have highlighted provide an overall picture of the challenges associated with faculty development and a new role. Thank you for the opportunity.
That was an interesting presentation where Professor Ashok Kumar is highlighting the need for a faculty member to be able to teach in a multidisciplinary fashion. So that is again adding to another angle of the complexity. So all these days you go to class and teach your subject, you have the domain expertise, but now you will have to bring in different angles from different disciplines, which means you need to be trained how to do that. So that's another angle to the complexity. So I think we have about 15-20 minutes time for question answers. But before that, would any of you want to add anything to what you have said just in case you felt you were short of time and you cut it short? No? Okay. We are happy to take questions from the audience. Yes, Parimala, you can.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Parimala. Firstly, thanks for an excellent session. This is something that we could all connect with totally. A lot of us discussed about the challenges that we face and how we streamline practices when it comes to offering faculty development programs. I just wanted to know what sort of planning goes into ensuring that the programs are relevant to the faculty, and also how do we measure the outcomes of the program, considering that a lot of work goes into planning. How do we measure the effectiveness of the faculty development programs that are undertaken? Thank you.
So would you like to take it, Dr. Seth?
So that's an excellent question. I know it's an excellent question because I've been asked it before and because I've asked it of many others before. And I don't have a very satisfactory answer to give you, probably. It's a very tricky question. For the programming that my unit is in charge of, we use a lot of the metrics you might anticipate, like attendance numbers. We send too many surveys. We send a lot of surveys trying to get feedback on, oh, you came to our event, you listened to our keynote, was it relevant, was it what you were looking for? Some of the reading I've done on higher impact ways of evaluating programming involves getting access to data that is sometimes difficult to get access to. Things like, okay, for example, we have like a 6-week training program for faculty on how to teach at DePaul. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could look at what their student grades and student evaluations look like before the program, they do the program, we look at the next quarter or two, and wouldn't it be magical to see an uptick in student performance and in the student satisfaction with the courses? The barrier certainly is the data as one element. And the other barrier that I see there is just there's just no way to isolate a variable of a 6-week program there. Because if a faculty member is trying out new pedagogy that they've learned from us, it might not go beautifully the first time. They might need to be iterating on it, and you might not see that impact for quite a while. And student evaluations are tricky. You just never know what has happened in a classroom environment from term to term to really know if it's your 6-week training program that has led to some sort of outcome. So I think we're maybe a little bit stuck as you are, so perhaps we can collaborate working together on finding some solutions to that.
Mama, I have a question.
Please.
I have a question for Agnes. Agnes, I'm here. Yeah. So, you know the Pathways program that you showed, right? I wish there was an Indian, Vice Chancellor or someone sitting here. But Bhama faces the same challenge because she deals with faculty recruitment. She and the Vice Chancellor. So I think I'm directing the question which they would have otherwise. So when you talk about the Pathways program, you talk about one pathway where they can opt for teaching as well as research. The other is solely research, and the third one is only teaching. And whereas when you look at the rankings, there is obviously more emphasis on the research output of the university. Now, what in your case, very less number of people opt for the first 2 pathways, and everybody says that we want to teach, or some department, we face this problem. In humanities and social sciences, there are people who say that we are excellent teachers, we will just not publish. What do you do in such a case? Are there any percentages that you have allotted for these 3 groups of people in your university? Or how do you manage this part if someone just doesn't want to take any of these pathways?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really good question, and it varies dramatically from faculty to faculty. So if we take our science faculty, they'll have practically no Pathway 3 staff, and that's fine. They'll be mainly Pathway 2s and Pathway 1s, whereas we look in our business school, we have an increasing number of Pathway 3 faculty. And the law school is the same. So we don't have a set, a percentage that needs to be in each group. We recruit as and when we need those different kinds of faculty. In terms of the sort of the fairness, what we've tried to say is that if you're on a teaching only pathway, we're not going to expect you to research, and that is absolutely fine. And I think I love this idea of us being protectors. And I think what senior management can do as protectors is, first of all, be really consistent, so that it's really clear exactly what the rules are for your progression and for your performance in each of these 3 pathways. To be consistent and really transparent, and supportive, and have people like Sarah on our staff to make people feel good. Does that answer your question? I mean, we have to look at it on a faculty by faculty basis, and the recruitment strategies by faculty are really, really different. So if you look at our chemistry faculty, for example, it's like the top research group in the UK. It's actually not that great at teaching, and it's like, well, you have to balance it up. And then you have other groups that are fantastic at teaching and not so good at research. And if you're looking at a big comprehensive university like we are, then you have to take a balanced view, I think, and just say, well, we are all the university. It's one of the things we say a lot at the moment. We're all one university, and everyone's got something to offer. And some guys are better at this, and some guys are better at that. And do you know what? That's fine, because if at the end of the day we're doing what we need to do, then that's success for us.
I just want to add a complexity to what you were asking. I know why you're asking what you're asking, because you're thinking of how do you present that in your own institution, and how do you think of hiring practices and things like that. So I'll give you an example from my own career trajectory, where I am probably right now for the past 5 or 6 years, very high-functioning research faculty, bringing a ton of grant money, publishing like I don't know what, nonstop. But if you asked me, is this what I want to do? Every now and then I'll say, oh, I'm done. I'm just going to go back to the classroom and teach 3 classes a semester. I don't want to be doing this. I'm killing myself right now. So that balance. So I have teaching research service, I'm tenured, all of that. But for me, the thing is the ability to be able to switch by choice and by a discussion with my senior leaders. I've had discussions with my academic vice president, the provost, that listen, if you brought me in just as research faculty, I wouldn't have come into your institution, because if that were the case, then my job is insecure. No thanks. So he had to make a choice that I was hired mid-semester because of the money I was bringing in. I said, but I am not coming in without the security of my tenure and my rank, and I will bring the money in, and that doesn't mean for the rest of my life this is only what I want to do. I want to be able to switch. So I think that's why I think about the long pathway that faculty needs will change. There was a time when my students were my children were in high school, and they were the focus. So at that time I would drop the bar on research a little bit so that I can focus on family. Because at the end of the day, we are all living humans working with the same goal. So bearing that in mind, as we call protectors, that is more important, I think, that where in her career trajectory is she? Somebody's just lost a spouse. They're an amazing faculty. They can't do something today, and then what are you going to do? Oh, no research, no job. Okay, bye, see you. That's not the people we are. That's not the universities we are, and that's not the people we are making, right? So I think bearing that in mind is more important, too.
Dr. Agnes, I have just another question. You spoke about the 3 pathways, but when it comes to performance appraisal, we always have a problem establishing the equivalence, because when it's only teaching, they do a good job. And when it's only research, they do a good job. But how do we say that this much of teaching is equal to this much of research? And we're finding it difficult, and we don't want to be unfair. So this is another challenge that we're facing. Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. And to the question about how do you input into the training, a lot of it's about collaboration across faculties. So we have 3 pro-vice-chancellors, and we're all from very different disciplines. But we all sit on the hiring panels and the promotion panels of disciplines that we are not in. So I sit on the science one. So I hire mathematics professors. I mean, I've got a French literature degree and have worked in business schools. Or I look at meteorologists. But what that does is it allows you to understand how things are being done across different faculties so that you get a sense of equivalence. So I think some of the sense of equivalence is you have groups of faculty who are asking about training, etc., so that you get from the ground up, you get that sense of what would be fair. And then from a senior level, you get this sort of this sense of what would be fair across different faculties. And then we have this very, so if you're making a case for your performance appraisal, you have to say that you're strong in 2 out of 3 things. So if I'm a pathway 1, I can say I'm really strong in service. So I've done some amazing things in my community, and I'm really strong in teaching because actually I've won an award for showing how you can use ChatGPT to save the universe or whatever. So there are 2 out of 3 categories. You don't always have to be all things to all people. In all pathways, it's 2 out of 3. So there's a kind of a choice.
Okay, thank you. I think Dr. Saxena had a question.
Can I, madam, one? Excuse me?
Dr. Saxena had a question. We'll come to you, sir.
No, my question, I think Professor Ramani did answer some part of that. My question was something very different to what Dr. Vidya was raising. It's just contrary of that. Because in my experience, I found something of that. There's a research professor who's completely in research, publishing extensively. Now we ask the professor to also get into teaching because the students want to really learn and get benefited by the professor. But the moment you ask him to teach, he suddenly raises his hand and said, look, that's not my job. That's the job of others. So somehow or the other, the teaching role gets reduced to something which is very inferior kind of a role. And the research is seen as a very sexy kind of a role, if I were to use this word, sitting amongst all these kinds of very distinguished academic leaders that are in this room. So my point is, how does the university create a balance between research and teaching? And this is something which is very contrary to what we are seeing in the US and the Europe itself. What Asian universities are really talking about is something of this. So I'd like to understand from you all, we have had some experiences from the US and from Britain, Agnes. You have brought some of those kinds of dimensions that are there. How do you create this kind of a balance? Because both are required for the university's evolution.
I can speak from my experience about, so being highly focused in research for some years, what has made teaching attractive to me, we are required to teach at a minimum 1 course a semester, so I was never hired as a research professor, I mean, yeah, it was irritating. I won't lie. It was irritating because it disturbs, your flow of what you're doing with your research. But I have to tell you, I have found the best student researchers by being in my classroom, by teaching what I had to teach. I have employed on my grants at least 3 or 4 of them. And in fact, I became doctoral faculty in a different department because we don't have a PhD program in my department. And I became doctoral faculty in a different department because I'm looking for those long-term researchers who would be willing to work on my team. And that part has made it sexy, the teaching, if you talk about it. Like, how do you equate it? For me, when we talk among the faculty who are doing a lot of research or bring in a lot of money, we talk to each other and I said like, oh, you're okay with teaching this? Oh, of course, that's how we go identify the best students for our teams, for our research teams. And actually giving back and forth knowledge. So for me, I think that has worked. To think about it from the frame of, okay, who is next I can hire? Because students have a temporary lifeline at the university. So they're going to graduate depending on which program they are, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So I want the PhD ones who will stay for 3-4 years on my team. So I'm kind of, gone and become doctoral faculty. That's the thing. But I have 2 undergraduate researchers working with me over summer, so highly talented. And you know what I told when I hired them? I've spent the whole semester teaching this whole classroom. I'm not letting my energy go to waste. So I'm hiring 2 right from here because I know exactly what you know. So the hiring process is so much easier for me on my research team. I know exactly what they know when they're sitting in front of me. Okay, go to Lit Review, Google Scholar, search this term, save these terms, put it on EndNote, find these, put it in a folder. That's enough of an instruction to get at least like my background literature ready for anything that I'm working on. That wouldn't be possible if I hadn't taught those students.
I'll just add one thing. I think it was mentioned before, having really clear role clarity. If you're recruiting a research professor and the expectations are to do research and one of the other 2 things like engagement or teaching, then there needs to be a conversation about, well, before saying why aren't you doing these things, ask, well, what sort of teaching would you be interested in doing? We mentioned all the different diversities of online teaching, graduate teaching, undergraduate, guest lectures and so forth, and finding out what you can draw out of these faculty members.
Yes, please.
It is not question, it is the observation related to what the pathways presented by Professor Agasti.
Can you hold your mic, please? Can you hold up your mic?
Are you able to hear me? Yeah. Professor Agnes presented the pathways. This is from the experience of ODL system and open universities. Teachers in open universities not only take classes and teach a few classes, and also they produce study material for the students. That is self-learning mode study material. And apart from that, in open universities we have learner support services also there managed by the teachers. We have taken from the experience of UK Open University. Almost all open universities are following the same method. Then the again question comes. Generally, what Sir said is by and large, the teaching, those who are engaged teaching are treated second grade citizens, and research teachers are first grade. And if you come back to the open university teachers, they are third grade. That is the problem. So, fixing the equivalence is the most important aspect for their future career promotion. We are facing the teachers who are working in learner support services, and in open universities, teachers who are producing study material for the students, and we supply SLM mode study material to the learners also. So these complexities are there. This is another new dimension added to the complexity. This is my observation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Nina Arnhold from the World Bank. And we've also done a little bit of work on academic careers in India. And I would like to mention that there are 3 very different perspectives. It's a perspective of policymakers, of institutional leaders, and of individuals. And we are discussing a few different things today. We also have a life cycle in the academic career. And we had some references to difficulties maybe with phasing in, especially in the public sector here. There are other countries which have problems with phasing out academics from the system. And then in the middle, we have the question of faculty development. Sorry for this lengthy introduction. My question is actually to you, Agnes. All the presentations were interesting, but from your presentation, I'm wondering a little bit about the question of the link between the institutional profile and faculty development. You mentioned, I mean, on one hand, you are a strong research institution, but you also see a mission in giving students life skills which they might not necessarily bring. And so my question is, how do you effectively link your institutional profile to your faculty development? Maybe very briefly. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's this whole thing about is being a 5-star researcher the most important thing, and is teaching seen as not so great? And if research is the best thing, then should you be giving students life skills as well? And how do you balance all of that out? I think a lot of it's to do with the culture of your institution. And it also, I mean, the pressures that you talked about, we've now, universities in the UK have now got to be partners in our cities, we've got to be producing lots of, so we've got new pressures that in some ways are quite helpful, I think. And certainly as an institution, we've decided that we are a global civic university, right? So that we've got 3 pillars: research, education, global civic. The global civic part says we will be helping students from our local area come to our university, and we will be giving employability skills to all of our students. Right, so that's a commitment. We've signed a civic university agreement with our city. So that's part of our culture. And yes, we're a top research university. We want to be a top research university. We want to be back in the top 50 QS rankings. The QS chat was here earlier on. We want to do that, but not at the expense of the mental health of our teachers, who we really need, particularly in the business school and in the law school, and certainly not at the expense of our students going out into the world and actually making a difference. Now that sounds very glib and easy. Of course it's not, because it's a massive, massive culture change. And I think underlying all of this, and us as being the protectors again, is instituting a culture change so that we don't have these, fetid 4-star professors that can do whatever they want while everyone gets on with the teaching, which is not very helpful, and we're not helping our students. So I think a lot of it's baked into our strategy, and it's culture, and it's long-term, and it's not easy. But thank you for the question.
Thank you all so much. It was wonderful. This discussion was really very interesting and very relevant to most universities. Summing up, the speakers had established the centrality of the position of any faculty in a university. Some important takeaways for universities are: HEIs must explore career pathways for faculty leveraging the demonstrated strengths. So we are talking about teachers and researchers. And valuing faculty of different pathways may not be equal, but must be equitable, so that the morale of the faculty is kept high. With a changing regulatory environment, it is important for trustees and the management to play the protector's role and to work in tandem to co-create systems and share responsibility of quality assurance and academic delivery. Investment in the well-being and development of faculty is the only wise thing to do. And faculty from their side should also be proactive and invest in self-development and understand and adapt to the changing landscape of the country. And I also want to once again acknowledge what Sarah said, that faculty development will have to be looked at very empathetically, and not as if it is something that every faculty must do as a tick mark. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
I think a great panel discussion, and I'm sure after listening to everything that the faculty goes through, I have always heard people say, when you don't have anything else to do, you become a teacher. But I'm sure all of us sitting over here as academic leaders have not come into this profession by chance, but by choice. And so, one last little note which I would like to dedicate to all the teachers, to all the faculty here, is thank you for all the hours you spend, attention you give, needs that you tend, knowledge you pass on, your special touch, offering guidance, undaunted by much, time you spend planning, efforts you make, angles to learning, chances you take, years to our teachers, each one is a gem. recognized now, we always salute them. Thank you so much for attending the session. I'm sure all the wisdom that was given by each of the panelists over here was very valuable to each one of us, and we are definitely going to take back a lot of lessons for us. Now we would like to end the session by... Hi.
Wanted to say, so if you've not already noticed it, my focus throughout this talk has been on elevating the status of faculty. And I just wanted to remind you, all of you have learned the word Vasudeva Kutumkum, and I've had Spanish-speaking people trying to pronounce it, right? And this Uni20 held in India, what I do want to say is, here in India, where I was born and raised, this is the norm. The phrase Mata Pita Guru Daivam captures it. The mother, father, the teacher, and then comes God. So if you can take this back with you from India, from Uni20, I would really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to call upon Dr. Anita Patankar to kindly felicitate all our guests. Yes, ma'am. So we start with Dr. David Ashton, Leeds Beckett University, UK. Dr. Sheetal Ranjan, Department of Justice Studies and Sociology, Montclair State University, USA. Mr. Peter Bentley, Policy Advisor, Innovative Research Universities, and Honorary Fellow at the University of Melbourne's Melbourne Centre for the Study of Higher Education, Australia. Professor Sarah Brown, Director, Faculty Development, DePaul University, USA. And Professor Agnes, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global Engagements, University of Bristol, United Kingdom. And of course, the thread which wove all these pearls together and made them into a nice necklace, our very own Bhama ma'am. I would request all of you all to please come in for a group photograph. Ma'am, one group photo. Thank you very much. Over to you, Anita, ma'am.
It's been a long day, but a happy, satisfying one. So when Dr. Vidya and our team at the international office started dreaming, visualizing, planning, designing for this Uni20, one of the questions that we kept coming back to was, how do we make sure that the delegates who come from across the country and across the world not only engage with us on topics related to this, but also give them a little more. We realized that India had suddenly become the flavor of the month or the year or whatever in the media, and there was a great amount of interest in India. I think India has also had that little exotic the colors and the food, the crafts and the arts, and I mean, besides Goa and all of those places. But there is a great amount of interest in India. And therefore, one of the things that we decided to do was to try and give a slice of India's culture. Therefore, since yesterday, if you've noticed, the cuisine that's been served has been regional. So yesterday, we had Maharashtrian food from the state of Maharashtra. Today, we had Punjabi. God knows what we're going to have at night. But we also tried and make sure that we would set up an exhibition. And one of the things that I think we hold very dear at Symbiosis is the fact that with every academic endeavor of ours, we try and make sure that it's complete and it's holistic, and whether it's students or faculty or visitors who come from outside, that there is something that makes it a complete experience. There's a lady who helps do that, or probably she takes over. We just show her, a little glimpse of our vision, and then she runs with it. She's a great friend, immensely creative. She's the director at the Symbiosis Institute of Design. I have known her for many, many years. She and her team are absolutely invaluable and creative, and this is their brainchild. And therefore, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Sanjeevani Ayachit. She's going to come and tell you a little more about how this happened, what's the idea behind it, and what does her fantastic team at SID do. And then later on, we'll see. But I'm not going to come back because she's going to leave you with some ideas and some plans so that you understand the exhibition a little better. But I am going to leave you with two, not instructions, but something that you should remember. Number one, tomorrow is the International Day of Yoga. And while the conference is a busy conference, we do want to make sure that we celebrate that day and, in a particular way. So tomorrow, from 8:45 to 9:15, we're going to have Naina Nimkar and her team come and do some chair yoga. So I promised her that I would say this. It's going to be yoga like you've never experienced before. So please do try and come at 8:45. And while you're seated in those chairs, she's going to try and tell you a couple of things, because I keep complaining about how I never have time to do what she tells us to do, and I'm very bad when it comes to doing exercise. So there's chair yoga from 8:45 to 9:15, and then our session starts at 9:30. The second thing that I wanted to remind you of is that there's a group of about 50 international and Indian students who've been working round the clock for the last week, trying to put together a small cultural performance, dance and music, some of it in true Bollywood style. So if you've heard of Bollywood, then please do come. If you haven't, there's that dear friend of mine from DePaul who grew up in China listening to Bollywood songs, and she probably sings them a little better than I do. But 6:30, Sandipani lawns, it's the lawns that have now been covered because we were threatened by rain last week. Please come there at 6:30. The students would be delighted. If you'd like to dance on the lawns along with them, please join in, and that will be followed by snacks, cocktails, and dinner. Sanjeevani, all yours.
Namaskar, and good evening, everyone. It is my absolute delight to be able to share with you a few glimpses of the extravaganza of craft and Indian traditions that we have set up right outside this auditorium, which I'm sure all of you have had a chance to experience, to go through, and I hope that you've also been able to shop from our dear artisans. So could I have the presentation, please? I have a short presentation for you so that I could give you a little bit more in detail about what we have done and why we have done that. All right. So what we see outside here today is a setup of 21 stalls having a display of more than 20 different crafts. And we have covered a very wide range of different crafts, ranging from the various materials that they are made from. So we are covering metal crafts. We also have some to do with textiles. And in some cases, we've also incorporated some rocks into the craft. So going ahead, we have tried to source and curate crafts for you from all the four corners of the country. So starting with the north of India, we have crafts like the Bagru prints, the Dabu prints, Leheria, and Fulkari from the north of India. From south of India, we have different kinds of carpets, ikats, kalamkaris, the Sandur Lambani embroideries from south of India. From east, we have Jamdani and Kantha. I know that stall has done a very brisk business over the past 2 days. And from West India, we have the highest profusion of crafts, mainly from Rajasthan, Gujarat, and also from Maharashtra. So like I said, we've covered a multitude of craft techniques. Some of them are applique, embroidery, block prints, metal crafts, weaves, resist dyes, leather, and bamboo. So going further, this is an applique technique which is from the state of Gujarat, where different layers of fabrics are patched together one over the other, and certain bits of them are cut out and they are sewn, so that the textiles that are under that layer are visible. So this is what we call a reverse applique kind of a technique. And this is practiced in Gujarat, and you can see them in 2 different varieties. One of them is white on white, which is extremely classy and elegant, and you also see them in multiple colors. The next one is a kind of embroidery which is practiced by the Lambani community, which is a semi-tribal kind of a community from Central Asia. So you have, from Central Asia, they have migrated to India via the Sindh and Kutch areas, and today they are found in several parts of the country, including Maharashtra. The artisans that we have invited are from Karnataka, from a place called Sandur. And they practice a very beautiful tribal kind of an embroidery. So being tribals, their embroidery is very simple. They use geometrical motifs, they use very simple stitches, but look how stunning the embroidery turns out to be. It's extremely colorful, and they also embellish it by the use of mirrors and metal bells and even cowrie shells. And they often have these large mirrors which are embroidered onto their own garments, because they say that mirrors ward off evil. So anybody who's casting an evil eye on you will get casted back with that same evil eye, and that's how the tradition goes. Fulkari. So we have with us Lajwanti ji, who is a Padma Shri winner and also a national awardee in her chosen craft, which is Fulkari. She makes the most beautiful embroideries. Fulkari is basically a craft which hails from Punjab, and the name itself suggests ful, which is flower, and kari is work. So it talks about how these textiles are embellished with floral embroidery. And initially, these textiles were very rough kind of cotton, which they call khaddar. And because they are rough, the ladies could actually count the holes in the thread, in the cloth, and be able to embroider those. So that is why this is called a counted thread embroidery technique, and this results in purely geometric forms. So if you can see on the screen itself, the forms are very, very geometric. Plus, it also depends upon how much embroidery you are willing to do on that fabric. So the one that you see here, the red base fabric is hardly visible. All you see is the embroidery. Such kind of embroidered textiles are called bagh. So a bagh is a garden where you see a lot of flowers. So see how poetic this textile is named. Also, this is carried out by women. And the women sit in their households after they finish all their everyday morning chores, and they sit and they embroider this craft. And every woman, once she gives birth to a daughter, she starts making this embroidery, because this is going to be a part of her daughter's trousseau. So that is how this tradition is carried out by women in their households. And whatever the motifs that they see around them, so they will take inspiration from dhania, that is coriander, or they will take inspiration from methi, that is fenugreek. Whatever that they use around themselves every day, they try to bring into their art. So we see a lot of everyday life being displayed through the art that these artisans are promoting and they are creating. Kantha is from West Bengal, and this is one of the most sustainable practices that you might be able to see. So a Kantha textile originally began as pullover that you would wear while you're sleeping to give you warmth. And this happens when you have old saris which are so worn and warm that they have become very soft. And they are layered together, and they are stitched together with a running stitch. And even that running stitch, that thread for that running stitch is pulled out from the borders of those same saris. So some of you might have known that in Bengal, women wear white saris with red borders. So they pull out the red thread from the borders, and they use that red thread to do that quilting. As of today, you will see that this Kantha technique is carried out on many other textiles except for those pullovers. So you will find saris, you will find dupattas, stoles, The Kantha stall has also done a very brisk business. A lot of people have been buying from him, so if you haven't had a chance to visit, do visit his stall. Ajrak is another extremely beautiful textile. This is from the Kutch region of Gujarat, and this is practiced by a community of Muslim artisans. And the religion of Islam prohibits them from using any kind of human figures. So if you look at the Ajrak textiles, they will only have geometrical figures or natural forms. So you will have flowers, vines, or any kind of animals are also not allowed, so you will only see floral and geometrical forms. And the colors that they use are purely natural. So they mostly use the indigo blues, the reds, and the blacks. And the number of colors that you see on the textile, that many number of processes the textile has been through. So that is where all of these textiles that we see here are very labor intensive. Bagru is one of my favorite crafts. So this is from the region, again, of Rajasthan. And Bagru and Dabu are two different textiles which are practiced in a similar region. And the Bagru textile also makes use of small blocks, and they use natural dyes to make those blocks into a design or a pattern onto the fabric. A Dabu textile is different from the Bagru in the sense that a Dabu also is a block print, but instead of using direct color, they use a kind of a mud paste. So they use that mud to stamp onto the fabric. So any kind of pattern which is formed, once it is dyed, that mud layer resists the dye from entering the textile, and what you see once it is washed is that that part retains the original color and the rest of the textile becomes colored. And that's how the number of colors that you see on a Dabu textile will be the reason why it might be slightly more expensive than any other textile. So the number of colors will add to the cost. Kalamkari, we have a national award-winning artisan with us, Lakshmi Amma. So she is a person who is an expert in kalamkari. The name itself suggests kalam and kari. So kalam is a pen, and kari is work. So this is basically how they use a kind of a pen. It's like a bamboo reed on which they tie a rag, and once you dip it into the ink, they'll be able to use that ink to draw the patterns onto the fabric. And once the patterns are drawn, they actually use natural colors to paint the fabrics. So this artisan that we are exhibiting here is from Sri Kalahasti in Telangana. And kalamkari comes in two forms. One is a block-printed kalamkari, which is practiced in Machilipatnam, and a hand-painted kalamkari, which is practiced in Sri Kalahasti. So Lakshmi Amma belongs to Sri Kalahasti. Do definitely take a look at her work. She's a national award winner. Copper bells, this is a very interesting craft. So this is a craft, again, practiced in the Kutch area of Gujarat. And these copper bells were made by the local herders in order to identify their livestock. So every bell had a distinctive sound, and they can recognize that this is my sheep or my cow based upon the sound that the copper bell produces. So every shape that this copper bell has, the thickness of the metal, all of this will go towards producing that very gentle and melodious chime of this copper bell. Rock dhokra. So dhokra is a brass technique which is carried out in several parts of the countries, mainly in the east of the country. But what we are exhibiting today here is dhokra which is practiced in Maharashtra at a place called Vai near Mahabaleshwar. So here they have tried to contemporize this traditional technique into a more modern version. So what you see here being exhibited is not the traditional dhokra, but a more contemporarized version. Nevertheless, it's equally beautiful. Silver jewelry. This is a gentleman who needs no introduction. He is, or wherever he goes to any exhibition, he's the one who does the briskest of business. And so he comes from a small town called Hupri, near Kolhapur in Maharashtra. And they originally made silver jewelry, but of course, because of the costs, they are now creating those same designs or even contemporarizing these designs in an oxidized metal which has a silver finish. So these also are very beautiful designs, and you will find that he also produces traditional Indian designs like the tanmanis or the thushis or what we call the Kolhapuri saz in Maharashtra, but he's also doing a lot of contemporary versions, so he's creating some beautiful chokers, which you might be able to wear even at any other occasion, even if it's not just a wedding or a family function. Tambat is a craft which belongs to our home city, that is Pune. So Pune has an entire lane which is called the Tambat Alley. Tamba is copper in Marathi, and people who work with this are called the Tambat, that craft is called the Tambat craft. And this is a specialized way in which they beat the copper so that it produces these kind of indents onto this metal, and they turn these into these utensils or things which were originally used for traditional like puja purposes or for heating water for bathing. But now, of course, it's been turned into a lot of other everyday uses. Like we use, I mean, a lot of us use copper bottles because they say that when you drink water out of a copper vessel, it adds to your health. So this is the Tambat craft of Pune. And the Bhujodis. Bhujodi is the region in Kutch, again, which is a very dry, arid area. And again, these people are herders, so they do produce a lot of sheep wool. And this wool they convert into shawls. So they also make shawls and stoles out of rough cotton as well as wool. And again, belonging to these areas, their colors are very, very organic. So they are using gray cotton or white or light blue, so their colors are very gentle, and their designs are mainly geometric. So again, because it is a weaving technique, all the designs are geometric. And particularly for the Kutch artisans, I would like to say that they have made a huge effort to be here in Pune to honor our request, to be a part of our event, in spite of the devastation that was caused by the cyclone Biparjoy. So I'm really, really thankful that they have made that effort, they have honored our request, and they've come here. So I really would request all of you all, I mean, once this is over, we will also be giving you a guided tour of all these crafts and introducing you all to these artisans. Do pay a visit to their stalls and offer them your patronage. Chanderi, this is a craft which belongs to the Madhya Pradesh state of India, and this is a very fine gauze-like textile. And these are mostly made in saris, but they're of course also contemporizing it into dress materials and dupattas and other things. So this is supposed to be so lightweight that it could pass, you know, the entire width of a sari could pass through a finger ring. So it's supposed to be that fine. And it's mainly made out of filaments of silk. Also, sometimes they blend it with cotton. Carpets from Warangal in Telangana again. So carpets are also a beautifully made. They usually are making them in geometrical forms. But these days, I've also seen them being printed with the kalamkari technique. So they are again very, very useful product, and you can use them as throw rugs in your room, in your home. I have a couple of these in my bedroom, so I use them, you know, as throw rugs in my rooms. The jamdani technique, again, a jamdani is a very fine gauze-like textile which is made in West Bengal. Of course, it is supposed to be, it was actually made in Dhaka in Bangladesh, but now it's also produced in West Bengal. This is a fabric which is so fine, made out of cotton. It was initially made white on white. And they say that when the weavers used to lay this on the ground, you know, in fields, people would not be able to see that there's something, and people will trample over it. It is that fine. It's supposed to be that fine. So that's a jamdani. A paithani needs no introduction. It is the, what do you say, the state craft of Maharashtra. And paithani is, the artisans that we have called, belong to this town called Yevla, which is it's a huge paithani center. And they are also diversifying from the heavy paithani saris. So these saris were originally made with using pure gold or pure silver, but of course nobody will be able to bear that kind of weight anymore, so they have reduced the amount of silver, or they're just using zari into these things. And they're also making it into dupattas or dress materials, and they're also converting it into small clutches, so that, you know, each one of you might not be able to carry off a paithani, but you can certainly carry a clutch made of a paithani fabric. Bandhani is a craft of Gujarat. So this craft is again practiced on very fine cotton and silk textiles. So they pick a small material, a small piece of the material using their fingernails. So I have seen these artisans, they have very long fingernails, which is that they use to pick these fabrics. So they pick a small pinch of it, they tie it up, And once the entire design is tied up, they dye it. So this is a tie-dye technique. So again, the number of colors that you see on a bandhani will add to the amount that each of these will cost. Ikat is another tie-dye technique. This is practiced in India in 2-3 places. In Telangana, which we call the Pochampalli Ikats. In Odisha, which we call the Sambalpuri Ikats. And also in Gujarat, that we call the Patan Patola. So Ikats are different kinds of tie-dye, but this tie-dye is carried out before a fabric is woven. So a fabric is woven with vertical yarns and horizontal yarns. So the vertical yarns are tied in certain places, the horizontal yarns are also tied in certain places. The entire design is engineered so that when these are woven, the design appears. So this does need a lot of maths, this does need a lot of engineering, and imagine a rural artisan being able to visualize all of that even before he understood what engineering and math was. Leheria is another kind of a resist tie and dye, and in this case, the entire width of a fabric is laid flat, and they start rolling from one corner of that fabric to the other corner, and then they tie it. So when it is unrolled, they find diagonal lines. And sometimes they also roll from the other side, so they get crisscross patterns. So a leheria which has only got one kind of lines is called a leheria. The moment it starts intersecting with each other, it's called a motra. Kolhapuri chappals, again, do not need any introduction. This stall has also been very popular today. I bought 2 pairs of chappals. I also convinced my superiors to buy a few pairs. So the Kolhapuri chappal is made out of indigenous leather, which is produced in Maharashtra. They also do the tanning themselves. So, and they also have this distinctive thought that the leather that they use for men's chappals is coarser and harder than the one that they use for women's chappals. So they know that the woman's foot is so much more delicate and they will need to squeeze their feet into the chappal, and that's why that leather is so much more softer. Kutch leather article. So again, Kutch, Gujarat is a vibrant birthplace of all of these crafts, and this leather is also used and converted into several different products like purses, bags, book covers. I think he's also got some footwear. So this Kutch leather art is also very vibrant and colorful. The bamboo basket, so this is a craft which is practiced again in many parts of the country. This artisan belongs to Maharashtra, and these bamboo is sourced from the Konkan area in Maharashtra. So the whole reason why we wanted to bring this exhibition to you is so that we could introduce you all to the various kinds of crafts that we can see in our country, and to also introduce you all to the work that we do at Symbiosis Institute of Design. So at our institute, we send the students out on a 7 to 10 days craft internship where they intern with these artisans. They identify craft clusters, they go and visit them, they live with them, and they understand how this craft is practiced in that ecosystem. So an ecosystem really influences the way a craft is practiced. So the motifs come from there, the natural colors come from there. So all of this these students learn, and then they come back to the institute and carry out some kind of projects. So I would invite all of you to collaborate with us in these areas like design intervention, or even creating awareness and even the promotion of these crafts. So this is a very great opportunity that we had through the Uni20 conference, which gave us such a huge platform to display the work that we are doing. And I'm truly thankful to our management, so to Dr. Vidya, Dr. Rajni, Dr. Bhama, who gave us this opportunity, this platform for us to put up all of this lovely work. I would also like to call upon 2 of my colleagues here so that you can see the team behind all of this effort. Anandita and Tanmay, could you please come up on stage? So this is my colleague Anandita, and that's Tanmay. And they have been the backbone behind putting up all of this effort. And they will be available outside, including me, to take you all on a guided tour to all of these crafts stalls, so that you might be able to interact with these artisans, understand from them, learn their stories, because they do have a lot of interesting things to say, and also be able to see some of the demos. So we've also arranged for a small demonstration area there, and you'll even be able to interact with the artisans. So thank you so much, and See you all outside.